Hey everybody, today's project is going to be the rebuild of the carburetors on my wife's Star 650. The project will entail the removal of the tanks and rear seats to gain access to the carburetors, the removal of the carburetors, the rebuilding of the carburetors, the reinstallation of the carburetors, the reassembly of the bike back to this condition, and then finally the balancing of the carburetors and checking for good order and operation. I've done a previous video that had discussed a way to get to the jets on these carbs without disassembling everything because they are easily clogged by ethanol gas. I had tried this method. There's something else wrong in these carbs. It's not just the jets. There are other issues. So it's going to require a rebuild. So I'm going to start quickly with the removal of everything here to gain access to this so we could get underway with the carb removal and rebuild. Let's get started. This nut on the seat here is 14 millimeter. The back seat remove exposes this bracket with these two bolts. This is 5 millimeter hex. This whole two-piece bracket in the seat lifts out, though this metal bracket is separate. We make sure that the tank is switched to the off position. Then we'll go and remove this retainer clip from the end of this hose here so that we can remove this hose from the tank, which may put up a fight until it breaks free. If you have a lot of gas in this tank and you do not feel comfortable removing this tank from the bike with a full tank of gas, you could attach a hose to here, attach the other side of that hose to an empty gas tank, or put it in an empty gas tank, and then switch this over to reserve and remove the top gas cap at the tank and then let it drain. If you have, crappy gas in here that caused the carbs to foul, you probably want this gas out anyway. I got a line going from the petcock over here down to an empty tank, and now I just turn it to reserve. With the tank drained, I shut the petcock off, ready to continue. These retaining bolts right here at the base of the tank are 12 millimeter. Note that the one on this side also holds the bracket for the choke. We're also going to have to remove this speedometer and console plate to expose the wires as well as the mechanical speedometer cable. This is going to take a 4 millimeter hex. Pull up slightly on the speedometer cable. I should be able to unseat this. Yep, there I go. If I can do it with one hand, you can do it with two. Unseat this and pull this unit up and get under there and unscrew the cable. You can see I'm just unscrewing it like that. It'll come right off by these last two connectors. And with that, the speedometer and console here is removed. So now we're going to lift the tank from the rear and pull back. See, it just lifts just like that, just lifts up. So I already started lifting it up in the back and just walking it back and forth as I pull it towards the rear. It was just lifted up in the back and then walked back and forth like this, slowly moving towards the rear to pull the tank out of those front brackets. And this part's really crucial. It's called have a place to put your tank before you proceed. And there you go. The tank is removed from the bike. The bike is now ready to do all the work that we need to do on it. I'm going to start by pulling the air filter assembly. This also includes this screw up here that holds the bracket that connects it to this lower portion of the hose. I like to give it some slack here so it comes out nice without bending that bracket. There's a clip on the bottom. Heard it pop out. Pull it down like that. The whole piece is removed as one set. And we'll check that filter out later. But right now we're just removing it. Take the Phillips again and we'll loosen the bracket on the top portion of that hose going to the air box here. Again, leaving enough slack so we don't deform that bracket when we remove it. Pull it out from under. Just like that. We can see the air box is connected to the top of the carburetors with this metal bracket here. My finger is pointing to one such screw, another Phillips screw on these. I'm going to loosen them for both sides of the carburetor. With that, the airbox lifts right off. On the back of the airbox will be a hose connection and it'll have a clamp on it. I compress that clamp with my fingers. It's one of those easy compress clamps, and then I'm able to pull that hose off And that is the connection for the airbox. It's removed. In this case, the bracket fell off. I could just put that right back on. The bracket lines up with the little notch right here. Screw head's pointing in the same direction. While I'm on this side, I'm going to loosen up this bracket here that holds the choke linkage in place. Or you could call it an enrichener. Call it whatever you like. Just don't call it late for dinner. There we go. Loosened, it comes out. Flip this forward. This comes off and sort of wraps around here. You can see it comes up and off to the side. It clears the carb. It's no longer in the way, so not really an issue. Next, we have a wire harness on this side. First, we have one of these bending metal tabs that hold the harness in place. I lift that tab up a bit to allow the wire to come out. I pull off this connection here. Looks like a heater. I've got a connection over here on this side. Pull that one out. And this piece of the harness is now able to come back. There's another bending tab on that harness we could see over here that I could then bring this back even further and out. Down below on the same harness, we could still see two more connections on the carb on this side, right? So I will remove those connections now. And now that whole entire harness is now disconnected, all of the connections. And we see 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 2 for each side. It is possible, if you choose, to leave those cables connected to the carb and disconnect it from here. Either or, it's your preference, right? So you could just pull this right out of here and leave those wires connected until you remove the carburetor from the bike. There's another connector right here, this black one that connects to the base of the carburetor. This one will also have to be removed. And that comes out like that. Working from the other side of the bike, I'm going to remove the fuel filter from this bracket here. It may release some more fuel, so I got a glass jar ready to capture that. Yep, and a little bit came out. We could see that there are 2 solenoids here on the carbs, on the bowls. They come up through the loom, and just right here on the top of the frame, we can see them connected. So I'm going to remove them from their connectors up top, and there is also a tab on the carb here that holds them into place. So I bend that tab out so I could unloom them and let these cables hang free from the bottom. And here we have both cables now hanging free. Over here we could see the fuel line. We're going to loosen this connection right here, just like that. And then we're going to pull this fuel line from the carb. There is a hose right over here. We could see this hose that I'm wiggling. It comes right here to this connection. And this hose needs to be disconnected. This runs up to the middle of the carburetors. Be focusing my attention on the throttle linkage now. The bottom connection here is 10 millimeter. I'm going to loosen out brake tension. Should then be able to just turn this, loosen that slack. This will allow this piece to fall out from under this linkage when I push it forward. The top one is accessible from the nut in front. After a couple of twists, I can loosen it out with my finger and get that outside the linkage as well. Bring my attention to the other side of the bike. On this side of the bike, I now have the slack that I require to unloom these connections by bringing them up in that slot. I've removed this one, and now the other one I can wrap around and remove this way. Now that one's removed. Both throttle cables are now removed from the bike. A clamp on each of the carbs holds it to the manifold. Those clamps have a hex screw that holds it on. They're a little tough to get to, but I loosen them up, make sure they're sufficiently loose as to not mangle the clamp, and these carbs will pop off. At this point, we should be able to detach the carb from the manifold. A little pull there. There's one. Pull this one. There's two. And lift it right up and out of the bike. Just like that. Quick inspection of the intake ports finds the clamps were found to be properly seated at the time of removal. There's no problem with the rubber that I see, no horror stories. As I removed it, a little bit of the gas was released into here. That's not a problem at all. I don't see any oil. It's just gas, so nothing like overflowed and back into these. I don't see any contamination. Everything about this is fine, no alarms. I immediately stuff these ports with clean paper towel, not some dirty, nasty rag. Clean paper towel to ensure that no farm matter or debris gets in here till it's time to put the carbs back in. And the motorcycle portion of this is now done. Before I get started on the carb, I conduct a visual inspection, and I did not see anything wrong visually. I did, however, notice that this slide was stuck. It's loosening up now. It does bind a bit, but was completely stuck. It didn't move at all. I imagine we may see something in here. With that, I will now be splitting the carburetors. No need to make any adjustments here or touch the synchronizer balance screw. I'm going to leave this alone. I will loosen this here for the enrichener and remove these 4 screws for the bracket. I can tell you that not a screw on this one is going to budge, and this is only going to come off with an impact driver, so I'm just going to set up for this now. I'd recommend replacing these with hex screws. Not have to go through this ordeal again. Move the C-clip over here. Careful not to lose it. Comes off with the spring. I should be able to separate the carbs just like that. On this carb, I placed back on the bracket, the spring, the nylon washer, and the C-clip so they wouldn't get lost. Put this off to the side. Start on this carb first. Start by removing the top cap for the diaphragm. Spring loaded, but be careful. Let that decompress. Nothing too bad yet. Pull the spring. Gently release the diaphragm. Ooh, that's on there. Okay, slowly peel it out. I see some, I smell some gas rot. Some debris on the needle. Oh, it's nasty. It smells nasty anyway. But it's not anything like rusted, or there's nothing absolutely terrible in here, except maybe some rot caused it to bind in one particular location. We'll be able to clean that up. Break down this side diaphragm, see what we got going on here. Another spring-loaded one. It's another one. It's really in there. Got some debris on the mating surfaces. A little bit of surface rust. Clean that right up. But on the brass, it's got gas rot. Some sludge. Again, nothing terrible, but needs to be cleaned. I can see how those things could bind. We pull open the enrichener. Enrichener is not too bad. Generally, they're not, because they're higher up. We're going to clean that anyway, of course. I could unscrew that and pull that out. I can unscrew the bottom. The jets I expect to be fine because I just cleaned them in an attempt to get the bike going. There's definitely some sort of rot, some sort of plastic forming on the bottom of this one. This definitely needs some more cleaning. I'm gonna have to strip this down further. That could definitely use a cleaning. We're gonna shine that, and you can see something started to bind to the screw right here. All right, we're gonna clean that too. Gonna pull these jets out. We're also gonna pull this entire orifice tube out of here as well. From the top doesn't look too bad, but from the bottom it's not looking so hot. And obviously this jet is clean because I just cleaned it. Same for this one. This is just cleaned as well. 8mm. Our piece from the main jet dropping out the bottom. We can see it's keyed, so it only goes back in one way. I'm going to clean this in place if I can and run cleaner through it after I do. This only comes into contact with metal and needn't be removed. This could stay in place. We're not going to mess with the throttle position switch. Start out with cleaning some of the pieces from the top side of the carburetor. Doesn't seem to be any debris in here. It's okay. This area of the needle requiring particular attention. We can see how it built up right over here. It's really on there. Clean up the slide. But I won't be using any carb cleaner on the rubber. I'm going to be using a lightly oiled piece of paper towel rem oil, very light, to clean that portion. Spread this around with my fingers. Here on the edge where it was sticking too. I'll stop that from binding to the metal. Drop this down, do the outside. Get some more on here. I'll let this sit for now. I'll wipe off the excess during installation time. Be taking care of these pieces next in a very similar manner. Just got the tiniest amount of cleaner on here, just to see if there's any debris that needs to be removed from the inside. This is plastic, so care should be given. There is also a port here. Should be checked to see if it's plugged. I can see it's not plugged visually. Run some cleaner in through there just to be sure. So we can see that this piece is brass. I'm gonna clean this right quick with some cleaner. Just get any debris off. Very small amount of polish right here on this mating surface on the brass to clean up this so it doesn't bind. We can see now that's nice and clean, good as new. Apply a little bit of rem oil here, clean this up, and let that soak in. Put these pieces together separately, off to the side. These are complete. Float will just be given a once over. I don't see any debris on here. There's a little bit of crystallization from the gas rot, but that's it. Be careful not to bend this tab. Very important you stay away from that tab. This pin for the float does need to be cleaned so it doesn't bind. I'll use a little bit of metal polish again for that. And that cleans right up. I'm going to preemptively spray a little bit of rem oil into these rubber seals here and clean off some of this residue that's forming on it. These seals aren't too bad. This should work just fine. I don't see any problems with them. Also, wipe out the inside here. The bottom of this bowl is fine. You can see this green that forms. This is from the gas rot. But I'm gonna clean this out. On the very bottom, I may soak that in just a little bit of carb cleaner just to break that up. So just let that sit for a little bit. Again, this isn't too bad at all. I just want to get the rest of that out of there. I want to keep it in this direction. I don't want that carb cleaner going up into the solenoid. I inspect the float needle. The float needle looks like it's in perfect condition. No problems whatsoever. It's not deformed in any way. If there was an issue with this, I would have to replace it. I'm just going to put this back with the float and that pin and move on. There we go. This is all cleaned up. See how this turned out after soaking. Yeah, we can see the material coming out. This will get sucked right into the carb. That's why it's important that this is cleaned out. It's all coming out. This is not a concern here. Hit this a couple times. Also, an important note, making sure that this passage is good here. There's a hole that connects through that solenoid to the rest of the bowl that feeds this. So, and we can see that that's just fine. No problem whatsoever. Let that soak a little more. Having cleaned all this up now, I just want to check this O-ring here, see if this is still good. Looks a bit eaten up. I ended up replacing this bottom ring. I took a look at it. This one's completely petrified. It's frozen soft like plastic now. So this one's no good. Put a little polish just to clean out this a little bit. Get some of the garbage out of here. Spray this through. Get this cleaned out really quick. There we go. Just gonna clean this one up right quick. We'll polish. There we go, that's done. Gonna clean up this jet as well. There we go, this one's done. Then I just have a couple of washers I just want to tend to right quick. There we go, that's it. Wipe this one off. There's just a screw. We're good. So I'm gonna put a 12 over the enricher right here. Break that loose. I use a deep well. Pull that right out. This one looks good. I'm just gonna give this one a quick cleaning. Not much to be done. As for this seal right here, I'm gonna clean this up. See what we got going on here. No, it still feels supple. It's definitely not held in. I'm gonna give it a little bit of spray on there and let it soak into the rubber before I try and pull that out. I'm just gonna bump it back and forth a little, right? Let that soak in. That way it doesn't damage the rubber when I try and pull it out. It'll get in between it. A little back and forth movement. If I gotta use tools to pull this out, this seal's probably no longer good anymore. And I'm just gonna leave that a little more. I'm just gonna leave that alone. While that's doing its thing, I'm just gonna clean this enricher right quick. This is the mating surface portion here. And the little tip at the end. This is not too dirty at all. I'm just gonna polish this up. I've seen some horror stories. This is not it. But a little polish, this stuff comes out like new. There we go, like new. Come back to this. Came out just fine. It is looking good. Screen looks good. Everything about this looks okay. No horror shows. I'm gonna polish the inside of this. Gonna clean this out, and we should be okay with this. Remove one side of this hose right here. Just like that. The top portion is the side that should be removed. This will allow us to clean through here as well as blow through here and test that air comes out the front. Make sure that passage is clean. This is not going to be dumped in a tank, and don't want to get this wet. The throttle position sensor, we're not going to be inundating this with tons of carburetor cleaner. Going to be spraying through here, spraying through the passages, not getting any of this electronics wet. Point out that there is a jet that for emissions laws has been capped, and if there was a need to get to it, the cover would have to be drilled out. I'm not going to do that at this time, but if forever I felt the need to do so, I could easily drill through that brass plug, and we're going to leave that in for now. And I'm going to start with the carb cleaner and go through the passages as necessary, and I'm going to be paying particular attention to that jet and see what the spray pattern is as I spray into that one. So I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. I want to look through some other things here as well. Here's the enrichener, spray into here, as well as all the way in the back is a hole to spray through. Spray out this bottom tube here. Spraying into here, sprays into this jet inside. That's good. Spraying into here, sprays up into here. That's good. Into here should spray out the side here. You can see that. Very nice. One in here should spray out the side as well. Very good. This will just give a quick cleaning right there. A little spray into the venturi, and the throttle body is not bad too, as long as I don't go crazy. Let it just drip out as I do that. And the plate as well. Clean that out. Open this up. Give a little spray. This particular area of concern where this needle is that can't be removed, if we spray into here, we should see come out, and we do. Good pattern right there. It tells us there's no blockage. If there was a blockage, then we would have to take measures to get that out and fix that problem. Removing this rubber cap up here will allow access to yet another port. If there's a blockage, this port can be opened up, and it can be seen from up here when spraying in. So that could then be blown out with air subsequently after that's finished. So I'll leave that off for now. This particular port where the hose is going right now, right, goes across this metal bar right here and out this hole up front. I'll demonstrate. You can see that spraying out. So that shows that port to be open. I'm going to spray some carb cleaner into the fuel inlet here. It's not going to take a lot, just to see that everything in here is fine. Comes through this pipe. This goes to the other carb, and everything here is clean, so that's just fine. So having checked, I come to find that I've hit every port on this carburetor. I've cleaned out every area, and I've done so without getting carb cleaner inside the throttle position sensor as demonstrated. I'm now going to blow this out with air. This carb is now blown out, ready for assembly. It's like brand new, perfectly clean inside and out. I'm going to start in the reverse order, placing the rubber cap back on. Followed by the rubber hose over here. Then I'm going to install the enrichener circuit, the 12mm deep well, like that. Then I'm going to give it a snug. That's it. Gonna test it out, nice and smooth. Everything's nice and clean, nothing binds. Look at that. going to take a Q-tip and put a little polish on it. I'm going to take this housing for the needle, for the float needle, and I'm going to clean out the inside, polish the inside a bit. Nothing crazy, just get any gunk out. You see it cleans up nice. The most important part is the seat on the bottom. Sides are important too so it doesn't bind, but the seat is important. We could see a shine starting to come out down there. See how shiny and clean everything is down here now to make a nice seat. No binding or anything. So I dry this off and I spray it with Rem oil. I bring the carb over. This should push right in. Shouldn't be any real resistance, no real binding. Just nice, soft. There we go. Yeah. And I've cleaned up this screw with a brass brush. There we go. Of course, we're going to test this out, not just for the seat in the middle, but what's around the sides. This diaphragm that's been sitting there soaking from our cleaning earlier. I place it back in position, sits like that. The spring will go just like that. Obviously the cap sits in one direction. We're going to make sure that this is perfectly seated. We don't want to deform this when we cover it. So I make it loose enough just to see, just be able to look around all sides that nothing's binding. And then I'll tighten it down. This goes in from the top. It is also keyed. It only goes in one direction. I can see looking down here where that key is off to the left side from my view. So you have to finagle it in. I get it in, then I'll just have to rotate it till it falls into position. And as I rotate it falls into position, put my finger on it on top and I hold it. Turn it over. We can see it flush on the bottom. With that, I can now get my pieces ready for assembly. So I got my washer and that nut. I'm going to turn it, hand tighten first, then my 6mm. Not too hard. I choke all the way up on it. I don't want to put too much torque on it. Just snug it down. And now we can see that this is back in position. Next, I will put this jet back in, seated right here. Finger tighten that all the way back in. Once fully seated, just give it a little nudge into position, and that's done. I will then take this, which covers the orifice tube, over here, grab my washer, and place that copper washer back over this, and turn this upside down so the washer doesn't fall, and screw this back on. Hand tighten again to full seat, then I'll take my 8 and just give it a little twist. Lock it into place. I'll take the jet for that tube, drop it in, little twist, tighten it, and that's it. With the float, I will then put the needle back over that tab so it hangs from it, just like that. Place it back into position on the carb and just let it fall. Then I will place the pin back through. I'll line everything up so the pin goes through everything. Everything's in place. Air pressure test shows that no air is getting through here or around here when the float is pushed down from gravity. I'm going to put a little bit of Rem oil on this seal again, one last time, as I place this cover back on. Rubber pad in the correct position. Pull this all the way up and then fold this edge downward like this. This is roughly it. Make sure this is in the proper alignment. Very important beforehand. I'll drop the spring in. And then the cover is keyed, obviously, for that air port right there. Hold that back on. Put our screws in. Okay, check the play of the throttle. That's good. Check the play of the slide. Oh, that is nice and smooth, like brand new. Perfect. Okay, this carb is complete. We're going to move over to the next carb. Click up here, this link on the top right, to go to part 2 in this series.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?